RCAP Solutions is part of a nationwide network called RCAP, and that is who we are. RCAP is RCAP, Rural Community Assistance Partnership, and we represent the purple states on the map. The next slide is going to tell us a little bit about what we do. And again, we are RCAP Solutions. We are a nonprofit company providing training and technical assistance to rural communities and tribes with drinking water and wastewater treatment. We specialize in small system management, general administration, and financials, including a variety of workshop topics such as this. RCAP can assist with determining eligibility for various funding programs to improve infrastructure. And we can also conduct income surveys. We also have many user-friendly publications on operations management, finance, and some templates for rate setting and emergency response planning. We have way more than that. Those are just the most popular ones. Our funders our primary funders are the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Health and Human Services. And because the training has been funded by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, we just want to say that the contents of this session don't necessarily reflect the views and policies of the EPA, nor does the EPA endorse trade names or recommend the use of any commercial products that we might mention in this session. Today's presenter is Jim Starbard. Jim joined RCAP Solutions in 2009. He has 8 years prior experience as a licensed sanitarian with duties including approval and inspection of septic system repairs and installations, plan review, soil evaluation, percolation testing, field inspections, system oversight, well plan approval, and inspection while inspecting water and inspections. Well approval and inspections. There's not a comma there. Including water quality testing, inspection, and enforcement of Mass State Sanitary Code and other applicable regulations. That's a mouthful. His education is a BS in Health Science from Worcester State University and a Master of Occupational and Environmental Health from Anna Maria College. He has professional certifications as a certified health officer, healthy home specialist, drinking water operator, licensed grade VSS, registered sanitarian, licensed soil evaluator, licensed Title V system inspector, licensed code enforcement, lead determinator inspector, and a very small systems water operator license. So this is the perfect person for the job to teach us today. And I am Rebekah Novak. I'm your organizer, I'm your host, I'm your tech specialist, whatever you want to call it. If you have any tech issues, feel free to reach out to me via the chat, or you can reply to the reminder email. That's also me. Let me know if you have any issues. And I believe, Jeff, you can take it away from here.
Okay, thank you, Rebekah, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you to the Quabbin Health District for inviting us to present to you tonight and for help getting the word out about tonight's training. So tonight we're really going to talk about private wells and a little bit on septic systems, really at the homeowner level, really what you would need to know about the, protect your family and your health from the private well water you're drinking. So tonight we're really going to talk about having, a properly constructed and a sited well, or if, at least letting if you happen to have a well that doesn't meet the current standards, and how you might be able to upgrade that well to the current standards to protect your health and your family's health. A little bit about where your water comes from, the surroundings that around your well that might influence the well, and possible risk of contamination of that well. Of course, the best way to figure out what's going on with your drinking water is to test your well. So we're going to go over testing, what's recommended in the state of Massachusetts, especially in the the area you are, and where to bring that water, bring that water to get tested, on which labs to kind of use, and how to interpret those testing results when you do get them back. Point things to remember once we start tonight. Private wells are not regulated like a public water system. Belchertown and Ware both have public water systems that are run by the town, and actually some individual water systems that are off the town's pipes, if you will. But they're public water systems. Small and communities are actually working with some in both towns as we speak, actually, and under our other work. So, private wells aren't regulated. Some sort of regulations when the well goes in the ground by the well drills program with Mass DEP. But it's really up to the owner after the well's in, the owner or the user to make sure the water that's safe to drink that you are having, and that the system's maintained to make sure it stays pure and potable for you to drink. And well water can be the best tasting and safest in the world, but contaminants also, most of the contaminants, actually all the contaminants that really cause health issues are odorless, colorless, have no taste. The bacterias, the radons, the uraniums of the world. Now, the only way to figure out it's in the water is to test it, because you're not going to see it. A lot of people will see iron or have hard water and get a softener because that it's something they can feel. The soap doesn't right, or their laundry gets rust stains. But those really aren't big health issues. But it's the odorless, colorless stuff that really can really affect your health, which we want to kind of stress today. The health-based contaminants should be of concern. So we're going to play a quick video, hopefully, and then basically how a private well works, give you a basic understanding, and then take it from here.
Jim, remind me because I put the video up. Which video is this one?
This one is the how does private well work.
Huh.
You want to launch that one?
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
It was not showing up for some reason, but I can fix that. There we go. Sorry about that. Can everyone hear that? I see a comment in the chat. Can everyone hear and see? Yep, okay. That was just one person. Sorry. Okay. Jim, I think you have to share your screen again. I'm going to send you the request. Sorry, I forgot about that.
You see,
Yep.
you see it? Okay.
Unconsolidated aquifer material. Yep.
Perfect. That's what I see too. Awesome. All right. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm having a little bit of trouble tonight, but I think we're working our way through it. Talking about where you get your water from. Up top is basically if you had a dug well or a bored well, where you get the water from. Basically, it's the water that's within the dirt, within the sand or the dirt, comes in through the different crevices of the dug well. And I'll show you more about the dug wells as we go on to the next slides. What we're really going to talk about for most of everyone's wells on the webinar tonight is that orange one on the bottom here in the middle, fractures in granite or fractures in rock. That's really where you're getting your water from. As they drill down into the bedrock, they're hoping to get through those little openings where you see that water. And then that is what fills up the column of your well case of your well, and then you pump it out. So it's really, for most of you on the call tonight, that will be what your well is, if you will. But there is a lot of dug wells still out there that are subject getting water from the top materials. This is just a diagram about how a contamination plume could affect your well, and even an area that you don't see, it doesn't have to be your next door neighbor. As you can see with this home, it has a forest between them and what looks like almost a landfill, if you will. You can see as the contaminated plume gets into the water, it can start, slowly but surely coming towards your well. So it's important to understand what's around your neighbors, or even in your neighborhood, or any other legacy uses, or any other there's a landfill in your town, or if there's a other hazardous area around. And that's something that the local board of health might be able to help you as well as identify. And then from there, you might want to do more testing for whatever could be contamination from that area. Say if you had a house that was, fairly close to an old landfill that was capped, you might want to test for like dioxin and PFAS and other things that come in from the landfill, if you will. So the well types, I think I mentioned quickly about a dug or bore well. And this is really the real old school way. Really, it's back in the day from 1700s on. They really just dug a hole. When the way back when they used to put in field stones, if you will, kind of like a fieldstone foundation and around the edges. Nowadays, not nowadays, but recently, they used what they call concrete tiles, which are almost like concrete donuts stacked on top of each other. And in between those donuts is kind of where the water comes in. Drilled and driven, that's really down the Cape. So we're not going to go over those tonight. That's really for sand and gravel aquifers. We don't really see those at the Cape and getting towards that area unless you're a public water system. So what we're talking about, most of you, is the drilled into the rock. And we're also going to talk about go into all these different types, if you will. And also we're going to talk about well logs and what hopefully you could find your well log, either the state or the local board of health, and how to look at that well log, because that well log, it really is the information god, if you will, for your well. It's going to let you know everything that you could possibly want to know about your well. But that is also something that's done originally when your well is drilled. I mean, so if you have a 50s ranch with an original well, getting those well logs is sometimes tough. So bored or dug well, really it's large in diameter. A drilled well is usually only 6 inches for a house. So these are like a pretty big wells. What you think of the old school wishing well, if you will. That's what you'd be thinking of. Like I mentioned, it's usually concrete tiles, those concrete donuts, if you will, stacked together. However, being that we're New England and have a lot of really old homes, it is possible, and I've seen it, that have the old school field stones in here as a dug or bored well. That's what they had material back then. That's what they used, if you will, just like they built the stone walls that separated people's property lines you see in the woods all the time. And water seeps in from the water table or water table through those little holes and then kind of fills up, and then there's a jet pump in the basement. Really, if you have a pump that's in your basement, 95% sure that you have a dug or bored well. If you don't have a pump in your basement, it's inside the well, most likely you have a drilled well. I have seen it vice versa a couple times, but usually the jet pumps that are in the basement go with the dug or bored wells. And this is just some pictures of different dug or bored wells. Sometimes you won't see anything. You'll just have, it's somewhere underneath the lawn or a patio out there, and there's no recognition of where it is because the pump is actually in your basement. Sometimes you might have little things sticking up like the one here on the left. Sometimes you might have a very unsafe cover like the one in the middle, if you will. But what you're really looking for if you have a dug or bored well is what's on the right. Again, this is old technology. It's more prone to bacterial contamination. However, that's, if you have a dug or bored well and you don't want to replace it with a drilled well, what you see on that right hand picture is about as good as you can get with the dug or bored well. And that would be, the recommended upgrade to try to, make it as best as possible. But as you can see, this has, some height off the ground for the, you don't have every rainstorm water coming in from the surface. You also hopefully have a cover that has a little bit of an overhang that the water then can shed off and not go into the well again. Still prone to bacterial contamination. However, it's about as good as you can get for old technology, if you will. And we're going to launch one more video. And Rebecca, you can cut off the end about the private well class.
Yeah, I left it the first time, but yes.
Yeah, they don't need to hear it three
times. Yeah. Agreed. Perfect.
All right. Oh, you can see bedrock wells now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're moving on to bedrock wells. This would be more what I would imagine most people would have. This is the current way to do wells, if you will. So basically, you drill into the ground. How deep is depending on how much water really you catch. How many of those little lines of water you see in the bedrock? How many of those you catch, and how much water they yield from each one you get. Um, you drill usually when they drill in, they put a casing, a metal casing, steel casing. Roughly about 30 feet into that bedrock and then grout it. That way, no surface water can come in the edges of it, and you're getting all your water that's been treated, hopefully, hundreds of feet, if you will. And the water really is just sits there in that bedrock fusers and fills that well casing. And then from there, the pump pumps it into the house. And like I mentioned, the hundreds of feet of earth really cleanses the water, takes the contaminants out. A depleted oxygen environment to make sure that usually there's not any bacterial issues. And if your bedrock well is experiencing a bedrock bacterial issue, it's usually some sort of surface contamination getting in, which is something we'll kind of go over as the training goes. The things to look at in your drilled well. One thing about these is they can be influenced over large distances. You can see, it's rock fusions. This was all, here for thousands of years. Some of them go straight up to the surface. Some of them can go, miles before they hit the surface. So, those water columns that are into the bedrock can be influenced over large distances. And we're going to play one last video just to show you how a bedrock well works, and then we're just us moving forward after this.
Looks good.
Okay. So we're going to launch a poll. Now that you've seen that, what kind of well do you actually have?
If you can't see the options, you might have to zoom out of your screen, or you can just write it in the chat. Dug or bored, drilled or driven, in sand and gravel, drilled and consolidated rock. Or you don't know. That's okay too. I think I have everybody's votes. I'm going to end it and share the results. Jim, I don't know if you can see these.
Nope. Can you read them?
Yep.
I don't want to break.
Yeah, that's okay. 45% of the people just don't know what they have. 36 have drilled and consolidated rock. 18% have drilled or driven in sand and gravel.
Okay, great. One thing about a lot of you said you don't know. One thing to look at is if you can see a steel casing coming out of the ground, most likely you have a drilled well. If you don't see anything, then it could be 50-50. There are drilled wells that are underneath the ground, but I'll show you more of these as we move along tonight. And just so modern wellheads, really, if you see this, if you see something like this in your yard, then you have a drilled well, if you will. And this really was what you want to see, other than the brush around the one on the left. But this is a well-constructed wellhead, and we're going to show you less well-constructed wellheads as we go on. The picture in the middle shows you a lot of the modern well caps will have screens. Same thing, kind of like your finger on a straw in a drink. No air, the water will just sit there in the column. So you want to have some water behind it to help the pump, pump the water into the home. So that something to look for when you look at your own well cap is to make sure those screens are still intact. But really, it's the one to the right. It's really a well-constructed well, what we hope to see. A nice sanitary well cap, good height off the ground. You can see it actually was extended. The well casing had been extended by the piece. And so it's something that I was actually repaired, but that's kind of what you would want to see as a modern private well at your house. What it should look like is all the way to the right. Wellheads, these are some not as good wellheads. Should be at least 12 inches off the ground, 12 inches off grade on the steel casing before the well cap. That gives you 12 inches of space, especially if you're in a flood-prone area, before the flooding water will actually go into your well and contaminate it. Anytime surface water goes into your well, we consider it contaminated. And should be bleached at that point. And actually, just with a homeowner last week, had a similar situation. The well was about 3 inches off the ground, had a not a good well cap. It was after a rainy day, you could see where water had pooled and ran by it, and sure enough, had a bacterial hit when her test came back the next day. Avoid any pooling or depressed air around the wellhead. You really want the water to kind of float away. You really don't want like a puddle to be sitting next to your well at all. And you want to clear any brush or any other vegetation around the well, just for pest harborage purposes. If a pest has nice cover to hang out, it's more apt to do so, and then find a way into your well. So those are some of the things to look for it. All the bolts should be tightened. I know it sounds pretty standard. However, we see quite a lot of it. No exposed wiring. The electric conduit, like you see in the middle bottom picture, very notorious as an opening going into the well. Frost heaves could happen this. Landscapers, somebody mowing their grass, they hit that electrical junction and break it. Very, very common. The one you see on all the way to the right there, that's a line going into the well. That used to be the well screen that we showed you in a couple slides before. A lazy well guy decided it'd be easier just to pop that screen on and bring a line in through that way instead of doing it the proper way into the well cap through the electric jacket. However, then that leaves a hole into your well where contamination can seep in. When doing a bacterial test, it's a zero error thing. So one little ant could give you a total coliform positive, if you will. So you don't want anything growing around it, and you want to keep the area clean and take a look at your wellhead once a year. You want to have no holes in the mesh, if you will, the screens. Not every model is going to have it. If you have a new well cap, you're going to probably have a vent. If you have an older well cap, those don't really have them as well. And just a little tip is from Danielle, the picture there. She's our colleague that does a lot of well assessments with us. Is you can look at your phone in the selfie mode, and kind of go around the edges of the well and kind of inspect it once a year to see if there's any entrances that you can see going into your well. Like I mentioned before, you want to keep it away from brush. We see it a lot too. People have a well and it's kind of far from the house in the middle of the woods. You really want to keep a path accessible, especially for repairs. If your pump goes down, the well guy has to get there, and usually he has to bring some heavy equipment depending on how deep your well is. If you have to clear a path out and find the well, it's just going to make the process any harder when you don't have water because the pump went out. And find something easy to find. Keep it clear with the brush. Maybe put a flag out there. And you really want to keep a direct path that if it needs to be serviced, it can be serviced immediately. Because when your pump goes down, you don't have water in the home. The last thing you want to do is waste time and other things, other than getting the old pump out, and getting a new one in. Well logs. I mentioned these before. This is kind of the holy grail of information on your well. There's really old ones like you see on the right one, from the Starbard Associated Boards of Health, which had some of the oldest well records that we've ever seen. It's one of the oldest regional boards of health in the state as well. And the one on the left is kind of the more up to date well completion. I don't want to say up to date because DEP was called the Department of Environmental Management then still, but the more recent ones, if you will. And in there you can see there's plenty of information, how it was drilled, when it was drilled, what kind of the casing is, where the water bearing units is, which is huge because that's where your water actually is coming out of those the holes in the bedrock that you mentioned. And then this well on the left, all the water bearing units is coming in 5 feet. It's 190 feet well, and 175 and 180 is where all the water coming in. So I have 190 feet. You got 5 feet of actual water production. So this is really a lot of information, but without this well log, you're really in the dark, if you will, other than doing a well inspection with the camera and pump tests and everything else, which really big money for a pre-existing well. So if you have a well log, it'd be great to find. If you do, we'll show you where you can look them up online, and also the local board of health might have it in their files too, depending on the age of your well. Well logs are online at the state Energy and Environmental Affairs data portal. They come out with much better legible, as the one on the left is, but that's kind of the search engine on the right, and that's the website where you can find it. And that's what a modern well log would look like. If a well is drilled nowadays, that is the well log you would get, and a copy of the well log under the well driller regulations has to go to the state well drillers program, and also a copy to local board of health. So if you have a recent well, you're more apt to be able to find your well log. But it's worth a check either way. But the places would be on the state website. They have all of them online, or the local board of health. So where's my well? Sometimes people, they have a buried well, whether it be drilled or a dug well, and but it's underneath the ground and it's nothing to really show. It's just a lawn basically. You can look at your foundation, look where the pipe is going. Look under rocks or rock wall area. Sometimes they'll surround them with that. Historic aerials, old satellite maps, if you will. Maybe that will show, and then it was taken, it was covered up since then. Metal detectors sometimes will work, but I've seen ones that I've seen ones, and I saw one in Sutton that was built in, we believe, in the old late 1700s when the house was built. It was underneath a stone patio and surrounded by field stones, so it was really, really hard to find unless you really start digging up the yard, if you will. So some of these are hard to find, but do your best to try to figure out what direction it might be. So I'm gonna have lost another poll on how old your well is, and again, this could be a guess. Usually, it's the year of your house if you're not, you don't have a very old house, if you will. But usually, 1950s ranches up. They usually the original wells when the house was built. But we'll launch the poll and see what the opinions are.
We have most votes already. Yeah, I think we got everybody. Well, we did better this time. More answers. Alrighty, I'm going to end and share the results. Most people, half the people said more than 30 years old. A third of the people said 10 to 30 years old. And we have 13% that said less than 10, and only a 7% that said they didn't know.
Okay. Well, let's say if you've been in your house, more than 10 years, and you tested you well when you moved in, it's time to retest. And if it's over 30 years old, it's probably time to test regardless. But we're going to go more into testing. All right, so consideration for wells, well depth, deeper is generally better. Like we mentioned, the dug well is just a little more prone to water quality problems, especially bacteria. Location on the landscape, is it up gradient or down gradient of problems? Are you down gradient of the septic system? Are you down gradient of a place that could, of a road that we have a lot of runoff going towards your well, and that road's salted with sodium, with salt during the winter, that could affect your well. Groundwater flow direction, usually, and I would say usually, it goes the direction of the topography. So, uphill, downhill. Not always. I live in Worcester, and we have some spring-fed ponds that are on top of hills. When it makes sense, because way on the top of the hill, and that's where the pond is getting fed by a spring. But usually, groundwater direction follows topography. In area surroundings and well setbacks, either it could be your neighbors, even stuff that you do on your land. Really want to keep your well set back from any kind of issues or any source of contamination. And here's kind of setback distances in wells. This was from the University of Minnesota, but we did increase it because Minnesota has a 75 feet from leach field to well, in Massachusetts, it's 100, so we did edit that, but everything else, we kept the same distances. But you can see, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can see there's a lot of different things that could affect your well. Everything from oil tanks, septic systems, keeping of animals, keeping animal manure, anything like that. You really want to keep everything you're well away from any kind of contamination source. You really don't even want to put a lot of lawn fertilizer or other kind of chemical fertilizer or herbicides or anything like that, pesticides around your well. Again, all of it will sooner or later, perk through the ground and end up in your water column. And the biggest thing we see a lot of, man-made issues is sodium and chloride from salting roads. We can definitely demonstrate an increase of sodium and chloride in public water and in private water since we started using it. You can see sodium and chloride levels steadily grow, and we've worked with quite a lot of homeowners that have wells, facing pretty busy roads that get salted regularly that has sodium and chloride issues as a result. And slowly but surely, it kind of builds up. All right, so correcting poor construction. The one on the right here, the picture down there, that is a drilled well, but it's in a pit. When we started drilling wells, we didn't have what we call pitless adapters. So we drilled wells, but we kept them in pits to keep them from freezing. So nowadays we have pitless adapters and able to bring the wellhead above grade, like you see on the picture, little to the left. But there's a lot of wells that are still out there that were drilled in these pits, and the pits are still there. So many of these wells, what we call grandfathered in, or pre-existing non-conforming. But the problem is anything in a pit, you can see it builds up water, and it really becomes a contamination for bacterial concerns. And it's also a safety concern as well. Those pits, a lot of them are pretty deep. A lot of them don't have a very secure cover, and it can be a real safety issue, especially for a small child that could fall into. So what we recommend if you did have a drilled well in a pit would be to bring it up to grade. Extend that casing, add pieces of steel casing to it, goes above grade by at least 12 inches. Bring the electrical cord up with it, like you see there with an electrical junction with no holes, no voids, and put a new well cap on there, and then fill in that the pit. So basically, what you see there would follow that arrow to look like that. And that is a very common thing that a lot of people have to do to improve their well, because it's just really prone to bacterial contamination being in a pit like that. So abandoned wells, something else too, we see a lot, especially if you have a really old home, a lot of, we've actually done a lot of private well assessments with homes that have the circa plaquage from the 1700s, 1800s. And they do have, sometimes they have existing wells that still work. Sometimes they have wells that they don't use for drinking anymore, but they use them for irrigation. Sometimes they just abandon them altogether. So there's a lot of them out there, especially in Massachusetts. They're not documented. They were back when these were made. They weren't looking for documents. They weren't really looking for water quality. They were looking for more water quantity back then. They don't really understand about quantity. So like well pits, it's a safety hazard, and it's really a source of could be a possible source of contamination of your well too. Because think about it, it's another hole going into the ground. So if you do have an abandoned well on your property, you should have it properly abandoned. Basically filled in completely, and then papped down so that it's not a risk. Bare minimum, you want to make sure you have a really secure cover on those, steel preferably, and just really don't want it to be a safety hazard. And there's tons of these out there. Just about a year or two ago, down in Munson, someone was walking, and I believe a state-owned land, and fell in one of these. It just happened to be in a field, if you will. So they're out there, and it's hard to know where they all are, because we weren't paying attention back in the 1800s where we put these. And that's just a couple of the old, some old drilled and dug wells. You can see the rotten plywood make it fall right in, if you will. And just some other, disasters, if you will, from well pits, and different stories, if you will. And this one is from actually 2020. New homeowner in Connecticut bought his house, helping him fall in, helping him move in, and it's fell through the ground into a 19th century fieldstone well in the basement, which again was a very common thing in the 1800s, is to get your well and build your house around it. Seen quite a few really old houses that have wells in the basement. I guess it's a good way to protect it from contamination. It's so they're out there. Just something to keep in mind, especially if you have a very old house and or very old old farmland possibly. And you might see these things. And this one is 19th century fieldstone well, like I mentioned about dug wells. Originally they instead of having the concrete tiles, the concrete donuts I mentioned, these ones were made with fieldstones. We used fieldstones for everything back then, actually. So I think we already mentioned this a little bit. This was another well in a pit. This one had a very good cover, though. You can see a silver had a nice steel cover to protect if people fall in. So like I mentioned, you really want to extend the pipe above the surface. If you're abandoning the actual drilled well, fill with clay grout. Fill in the voids. If any questions, really contact the well drills program in Massachusetts, State Mass DEP well drills program, or your local contractor that's experienced in private wells, and they'll let you know what to do with them. Like I mentioned, though, if you have a dug well, the ultimate thing really is to do is put a drilled well in, but there are ways to make it not as bad. If you have a drilled well, you really want to bring that drilled well above grade, at least 12 inches. Natural groundwater quality. There's a lot of information you can find about groundwater quality, maybe online. I'll show you a couple of resources Mass DP has. Also, your local water health will have a better idea of what kind of issues might be going on in town. Legacy contamination issues, old landfill issues that might have been in, or anything that might, you know, might affect your well. So it's worth asking the local health authorities if there's anything in your relative neighborhood to worry about. And once you have an idea about the nuisance and health-based contaminants, you can really come up with a testing idea. But beyond what we're going to show you tonight on what the contaminants you should worry about and what Massachusetts recommends. And we mentioned we want to isolate your well as much as from any contamination source. And like I said, groundwater direction usually goes with topography. So, ideally, if your well is upstream instead of downstream, the better you are. Septic systems, we've got to quickly mention that because they can actually affect the water quality of your well. And, what goes out eventually comes in, if you will. So septic systems, eventually they will fail, but proper maintenance can help prolong them and make them last. 20, 30 years, the average years, but I've seen 70 or 80-year-old septic systems that still work perfectly. So it all depends on how it was installed, where it was installed, how was it maintained. You really want to have your septic tank pumped on a regular schedule. It's really based on the size of your tank and how many people in your home. Massachusetts septic systems are built by bedroom, with the worst case scenario of 2 per bedroom. Say you have a 4-bedroom house, your septic system is built for 8 people. So 2 to 3 years is the average to pump. But say there's 2 people in a 4-bedroom home, you could probably go longer. If there's more than 2 people per bedroom, you probably want to pump a little bit more frequent. Or there's other mitigating circumstances. If you're putting down a lot more flow, you might want to pump it a little bit more. And if you have a reliable septic pumper and they come, say, every 2 years and they say, hey, you could wait another year or 2 and nothing changes in the house, then probably, that's a good thing. You just don't want to go. I met with a homeowner last week and they haven't pumped their system in 6 years. A little too long. They had, pretty, 4 bedrooms, 4 people. I recommend they pump it. So, but a good pumper will give you a good idea if you don't overdo it, if you will. Don't put any toxics down the drain. It disrupts the natural biological treatment. And actually, we're finding too, the chemicals you put in there could find their way back in the well. We're seeing that with PFAS quite a lot. And we'll get more into PFAS a couple of slides later. So you only want to put down number 1 and number 2 in toilet paper really into your septic system. Anything else really is it could mess with the biological treatment and add chemicals that affects your well. And be sure to know where your drain field is. Drain field really should be just a grass lawn, passive recreation on it. You don't really want to build anything on it, if you will, or build a vegetable garden on it. It really should be just a grassy area. And you also want to keep it from getting overgrown. You don't want trees growing onto your leach field because those roots will just go right in and ruin the pipes and your leach field's ability to treat the water. So septic systems is a basic diagrams, if you will. On the left there is a septic tank. Basically, a septic tank's job is really to separate the solids from the water and start a little biological processes, if you will. From there, from the septic tank, it's going to go for most systems, it's going to go to what we call a distribution box, or the D box, and that's just going to equally distribute the water throughout the leach field, and that way the leach field gets dosed pretty equally. And hopefully most of the solids, the sludge, the scum, everything stays in that septic tank. And what you're doing is pumping out those solids out of that septic tank when you're having your system pumped. But if those solids and scum, if they build up too much and make their way out into that D box, into the leach field, that's when you could start clogging your system and causing premature failure of your leach field. The leach field really is the linchpin of your septic system, if you will. If that goes, that's the big money repair, if you will. A D box is cheap to fix. A new septic tank's not cheap, but it's easier. But that leach field goes, you're talking about reciting if you don't have a reserve field, and it's a lot of work. Septic system D-box, just a little bit more on the distribution box. As you can see, that's kind of, it's a basically just a box where all the flow is equalized and then leach fields dosed equally. That way, the whole field gets a good dose of the water, and not one area is getting more than the other. And just a little bit more information. You can always Mass DEP has a lot on septic systems, but also EPA has a good site on Septic Smart, which is in Septic Smart month is in September. So another poll, how old is your septic system? And this is a question that can vary, not be the age of your house, because we have Title V in Massachusetts, and transfer of property, that's when a lot of the old systems that aren't functioning well get identified.
Okay, I think we have all the votes. Everyone's pretty quick tonight. Alrighty. A third of the audience said 20 to 30 years old. Then we have 23% said less than 10, 23% didn't know, and then the remaining 8% was more than 30 years old.
All right. Well, with the highest numbers being 20, 30 years, make sure you're pumping it. Make sure, prolong that system as much as possible. All right, so on the water quality testing. So there's a lot of questions on water quality. I mean, there's so many different things you could test for, but we're going to kind of look at what Mass DEP recommends for private well owners to sample in Massachusetts. So right on the right, really what they call the standard analysis. Some of these are secondary, and some of these are what we call health-based contaminants. The health-based contaminants are things like arsenic, manganese, nitrate, nitrite, coliform bacteria, radon, VOCs. Those are what we call health-based contaminants. The reason being is they can get you sick. There's ones that are acute, get you sick, immediately, like an E. coli, E. coli. We test for total coliform bacteria, but if that's positive, then we automatically test for E. coli. E. coli, you can drink that once, you can get very sick. If you're immune compromised, you could actually die. When you see like a public water system have a boil order, usually they have an E. coli. One of the samples came out positive for E. coli. Now the other things, nitrate, nitrite, that's another thing that can be acute, especially if you're a baby or if you're a pregnant woman or a nursing woman. Nitrates and nitrites could cause blue baby syndrome. It's a way for the hemoglobin don't really react, and the oxygen can't be carried in the baby's system. All the other ones are like chronic exposure, if you will, your arsenic, your radon, uranium, gross out VOCs. Those are, you ingest them over a number of years, and they cause health issues. So there's a lot of different things to look at, but these are what in Massachusetts is recommended. They've also included PFAS now as a recommended testing that everyone tests for. They just haven't updated this infogram. So, but we'll get into PFAS as well. But these are the contaminants that they recommend testing for at least every 10 years in Massachusetts. Yearly, we recommend testing for coliform bacteria, nitrate, nitrite. Again, because they can change quickly and they can get you sick immediately. So those are the two. And one other thing to mention too is on the nitrate, nitrite. That's a good way to monitor if your septic system is working correctly. We normally will see a nitrate increase in a well long before we see a bacterial hit, and 9 times out of 10 it usually trace back to a non-functioning septic system not treating the water well. So where do I get the sample? Usually we like to say sample at the kitchen sink. That is normally where you get your water for drinking and eating purposes. So we kind of want to replicate what you would do when you wake up in the morning and get a glass of water or cook food. And a good lab will provide any detailed instructions, give you all the sample containers, the chain of custody, everything you would need to do the sample. So what do I test for? We showed you what's recommended. But it does depend on the depth of the well. Like we mentioned, a dug well versus a bedrock well. If you have a dug well, you don't need to test for radon or uranium or gross alpha because you're not in the bedrock, and those are where the radiological is going to be. If you have a drilled well, then we recommend that you would test for that. Again, that's where the water formation comes. Now, known contaminants in the area. Now that could be, we went over the generalization of what Mass DP recommends be tested in Massachusetts. Known contaminants in the area. This would be something that you need to consult with probably a local board of health or other, or maybe even Mass DP files to know if there's other contaminants in your area. Like we mentioned, like a landfill in the area, maybe you want to then look for PFAS and dioxin and other chemicals that might possibly be from there. If you live near an airport, it was very common that they used fire retardant that had very high PFAS levels. Then probably would recommend, or a fire academy, if you live near one of them, they'd recommend you test for PFAS. So other contaminants of concern, however, they're only, if you will, hot spots. So, sometimes you need to just get a little bit more information for that. And like I mentioned sample for total chloroform and nitrite annually because they can change quickly, and it does, become acute. It can get you sick immediately, and it will show you too if you have an issue with your well or with your septic system, especially with the nitrate. Mass DP has done some studies with USGS on probability arsenic, uranium, and bedrock wells. This is in general, but you can put in your street address, and it will give you, kind of a yay or nay if you really should test for it, if you will. This is really in general. We've done some other testing for uranium and arsenic and found it in areas that this didn't pull up on, and actually Mass DP was pretty intrigued about it. We gave them a little bit of information on it. So this is in general, and the best science, if you will, we have for the data we have, but something you can do the search. And we did mention all this. Again, this is the annual initial inspection. So if you haven't done annually, you want to test coliform, nitrite. Initially, every 5 to 10 years, all the other stuff that we mentioned, or if you haven't tested your well at all, you want to start with that. And like I said, ask your local board of health if your area, if there's anything else they might know of and other tests you might consider. So we're going to launch another poll on testing and see where we are as far as testing.
I think people probably need a couple extra seconds on this one to think about. I know I would. We'll give it a couple more seconds. I know we got more answers last time. It's okay if you don't know. I'm going to end and share the results. Alrighty. Half the people said less than 10 years ago. And
that's good. That's good.
38% didn't know. And then we have a couple of people that said 10 and 20 and a couple of people that said 20 to 30. Or one person that said 10 to 20 years ago and one person that said 20 to 30 years ago.
Well, if it's been over 10 and you don't know, we hope you take advantage of something we're going to announce soon. All right, so reason to test your water. This is just, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but different issues you might have going on and, what to test for. Gastrointestinal illness, like you mentioned, bacteria, coliform bacteria, which would then test for E. coli if it's positive. Household plumbing containing lead, or maybe say you're getting blue staining when you turn your water on in the morning. Most likely have a low pH. That low pH is causing the copper pipes to get eaten away, and that blue is copper that you see. But as you see, there's a lot of different things to look at. We're not going to go through each one of them, but there's a lot of cause and effect, if you will, things you should look at to test for if you're having these issues. Okay, so where do I get it analyzed? Well, Mass DEP certifies labs. So we recommend using only a Mass DEP certified lab. There's one right in Belchertown. I'm not supposed to say who the names are, but we're talking about Belchertown and Wareham, and they're the only ones in the area. So a good lab will give you detailed sampling instructions, explain how to store and preserve the sample, let you know how quickly you need the sample after the collection. Usually, I would say get the instructions and all the bottles you need. The day you're going to test it, take the sample at your house under those instructions. Throw it in a cooler and bring it right to the lab that day. You really don't want it sitting around. So if you plan on doing the test that day, plan on going to the lab that day. Like I mentioned, the lab will give you everything you need, and really ask questions until you're satisfied that you're doing the right thing. Because some of these tests are, if you're not sampled right, they can't take it. Say you did a radon test and your bottle has an air bubble in it, the lab can't accept it. So you definitely want to make sure you have, you answer questions so you're satisfied, you understand what you're doing, and then when you get there, all will go well. And this is the link for it, but that's in your materials section, how to find a certified lab. Mass DEP, there's a search engine. Basically, you would put in drinking water. You can pick by your region, which would be in the Western DEP region, and then there. All right, interpreting results. So there's a lot of websites and documents out there. We're going to introduce you to what's called the Being Well Informed tool. This was started by New Hampshire DES under a CDC grant. Other states adopted it, including Massachusetts. So this will kind of probably be the easiest way. It's something that's found in your well. We always recommend resampling to confirm, especially if it's a bacteria. Bacteria can. I'm hearing a lot of clicking, Rebekah.
Yep, you're right.
Yes. So especially, you might want to do a resample to confirm if the bacteria, because you could really contaminate just from your hands. So you want to keep an eye on anything like that. If bacteria is present, the lab is actually going to do an E. coli. This is part of a nationwide slide here. But in Massachusetts, when you sample total coliform, the lab is automatically going to screen for E. coli if the total coliform is positive. Again, if you do test your well and you find out you have E. coli, that is do not use or do not drink unless you're boiling your water. Think about it like a boil water. If the water company says it, you don't want to use it for eating or drinking unless it's boiled, or you're using bottled water until it's fixed. Most bacterial problems can be fixed at the well by upgrading the well, chlorinating the well, and making sure you have the height and no openings and the right well cap, like we went over earlier. So this is the Be Well Informed tool. It's really great. Yeah. Basically, you take your lab results, you type in the numbers that the lab gave you, and it's going to spit out information on is it good or is it bad, and if it's bad, what should you do about it? It's a great tool, and recommend you take advantage of it. And this is kind of what it spits out, if you will. And it will show, you'll see the green arrows there, then there's a red arrow, and then it will tell you, what kind of treatment you should consider if you have some sort of issue. And this is our partner in our nationwide private well program. The private well class is out of the University of Illinois. They run they actually run the private well hotline now for CDC, but they also do a lot of classes and a lot of other information if you wanted to learn even more. It's privatewellclass.org. It's in your materials. They regularly have webinars like this nationwide, though. And they also have like self-paced trainings on there and just really good, just normal information if you're looking for any more information on your well. So in conclusion, it's kind of really all about being aware. If you get your well log, it's the best piece of information you can get on your well. It's going to tell you the depth, pump setting, if there's screening in there, where the water's coming in from, what kind of water you have from the pump test. Really, if you can get that well log from either the state or look at the state website, it's in your materials, or your local board of health. You could that's the biggest piece of information you can get. Try to understand where the naturally occurring contaminants are in your area, and I think water quality, any other water quality issues you might think. And the biggest thing is sample your well. It's been over 10 years. Sample for everything. If it's, and annually, preferably July, August, September, sample your well for bacteria and nitrite. Why I say in the middle of the summer, that's really when you're going to get a really good idea if you have a problem with your well or not. We have the thunderstorms coming, bacteria is growing, animals and insects are moving. That's really when you're going to get an idea. You could sample your well in January, same well, same conditions, and it could pass, negative for a total coliform. Then sample it again July, August, and it would be positive, just because it's the weather and environment is just much more prone for bacterial growth and contamination. And that's really when we see the public water systems have a lot more problems too, is the tail end of the summertime. And I put this just in there because it's kind of the hot topic in the drinking water world, and you've probably seen in the news, is PFAS, PFOA. And these are, there's thousands of these. We call PFAS as kind of like a general term, PFAS, PFOA being the two biggest, if you will. But there's thousands of these. They just changed the fluorine and the carbon here and there and made a whole new one. So these are man-made chemicals. They used in everything, and they still are used in everything. I should mention. We're still putting it into the environment. A lot of this. Stain resistant, water resistant, non-stick, firefighting foams, food packaging where you see like a waxy layer or even a waxy plate, outdoor clothing, carpets, leather goods, ski waxes. We've actually seen a big contamination issue at a ski resort from ski wax up in Vermont. And more. I mean, these are in everything. Dental floss, you name it. PFAS is still there. The only thing we've banned in Massachusetts out of is new firefighting equipment at this point, and drinking water in public water systems. It's what is PFAS? It's persistent in the environment. It leaches into the groundwater from either spills or landfills or just slow. We've seen it now in septic system, air disposition, and it really is effective in the groundwater system wells. Not an issue in like a reservoir at Quabbin Reservoir doesn't have these issues, or none of the big water systems in Springfield Water and Sewer, Worcester. None of them that has surface water has these issues. It's really a problem in groundwater sources, and in the public water systems, it's really the small groundwater communities that are been affected so far, the Massachusetts standard, and are going to be affected when the new EPA standard comes, which is much, much more stringent. And it's linked to all kinds of health risks. We're learning more and more every day. Like everything, particularly in immunocompromised people, women who are pregnant, nursing, and infants, but it's linked to cancer. I mean, I've seen everything from weight gain, you name it, as an issue. But PFAS it's an ever growing issue. More science is coming out all the time. When we first started hearing about it about 10 years ago, the recommendation was to keep levels under 100 for PFAS, PFOA, and now we're going down to 4 parts per trillion. So, you can see the science is ever evolving and getting a lot more stringent. In Massachusetts, we do have a standard for the PFAS 6, and again, there's thousands of these PFAS chemicals. The toxicologist of Mass DP made a recommendation that these 6 were to be regulated in public water systems starting in 2020 for a sum of these six could be under 20 parts per trillion. Again, this only applies to public water systems, not private wells, unless the local Board of Health institutes a regulation. In Massachusetts, each and every Board of Health makes their own private well regulations and what testing is required. Some boards of health have gone forward in this, some have not. But again, like we said, private wells, private being the word, you're in charge of the water you drink, and if it's healthy or not. Now, like I said, we have a Massachusetts standard. It's been since 2020 of 20 parts per trillion for six. We now have a federal EPA standard for public water systems that goes in effect in 2 years of PFAS and PFOA at 4 parts per trillion for individual size. So you can see it's already gone down, a magnitude of 5, if you will, in just that. So, what we're looking at is 4 parts per trillion for PFAS and PFOA. Now, Mass DEP has done some sampling for PFAS in private wells. That was in communities of 60% or more of their community on a private well. Neither Ware or Belchertown was in that program, because you have your own public water system, if you will. But statewide, for the state PFAS 6, they found about 5% of the wells they tested were exceeded that. They went back and did the calculations of the new standard, and now they're up to about 15% of every private well in Massachusetts they tested was over 4 parts per trillion. So that is why they're recommending now that every private well owner test for PFAS and PFOA, as well as the other contaminants we showed you, because that's up to 15% of all the wells that are in Massachusetts that they tested, and they tested, a couple thousand at least wells during this program throughout the whole state. And just another graphic on how PFAS gets into the human exposure. And as you can see, it's pretty much for everything. The food we eat, what we cook the food on, firefighting materials, the clothes we put on our back, the water we drink. This stuff is, we've been making it for years. It's called a forever chemical for a reason. It stays around forever, and now we're finding it's highly, highly, highly toxic. And better living through chemistry. But as you can see, it's in everything. The concentration now is in getting it out of the drinking water, but there's still plenty of other sources in the environment that could get you exposed to PFAS. All right, and we're going to turn it over to Andrea now to discuss a little bit about something they have going on at the Quabbin Health District.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks so much for the information. You kind of gave me an excuse not to floss anymore. I didn't realize PFAS was in dental floss. My goodness. I'm just kidding, though. I will continue to floss. I think that's good hygiene. So anyways, we are having free private well testing. That's going to be a test just for the basic parameters for basic water potability, and it's going to test for 16 parameters, which includes a lot of the parameters that Jim mentioned, like the nitrates and the nitrites, the total coliform and the bacteria, and a lot of the secondary standards too, like iron and manganese, pH, and sodium. We have a limited amount of tests available, and these tests are available for Belchertown and Ware residents that have a private well. So to sign up, you would want to go to the Quabbin Health District website, which the link has been provided to you, but it's www.quabbinhealthdistrict.com. The site to log in and register will be on the homepage. It won't be available until 8 o'clock tonight. So at 8 o'clock tonight, if you go onto the Quabbin Health District website, right on that homepage, you will see a sign up screen on signing up for that free water quality test. And again, you have to be a resident of Belchertown or Ware, and you have to have a private well. Desiree Vinert, who is on the workshop tonight is our support staff, and she will be the one that you will be when you sign up, the email goes directly to her, and she will be contacting you to schedule a home visit. So she will get all of the kit to do the water testing and come to the house to test the water, and then she brings it to the lab. And then when the water quality test comes back, the homeowner gets a copy of it, and we can walk people through the water test results. And we also use the Be Well Informed tool as well. So we put the results in that are an exceedance, and on the Be Well Informed tool, it tells you the health effects of that particular parameter and some options to remedy that situation. Sometimes it involves a filter, sometimes it involves retesting, but we can walk people through the test and answer any questions. So, if you don't have a private well and you're on the call, but somebody in Belchertown or where that has a private well that could benefit from a free well test, encourage them to sign up. We have a limited amount for both communities. So thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you. And we got one other slide just to say it doesn't include PFAS, urema, radon, but radon can be through, you can get that ordered through the AccuStyle labs in Ward Hill. We used them before and very, very inexpensive for PFAS, for radon, if you will. Okay, so now we're going to open up any questions you had for me or Andrea.
We have a couple that I'll be reading. If folks would like to write them in the chat, or I will, after we get closer to the end, I will allow hand raising, and I can unmute you if you would rather say it out loud. First question, does contamination need to be down gradient from the private well to cause contamination in the well?
Not always, but it's more prevalent if it's flowing towards the well and then settling there. Say like like a road salt coming off during a rainstorm that washes down towards the well. If it's settling around the well little by little, that sodium chloride is going to go in. But if you're above that road, that sodium chloride is kind of going away from the well. So kind of think about it like that, if you will. But some of this stuff, just goes into the aquifer and stays there like a PFAS. So.
Okay. Second question. It's a little bit long, has a little bit of a backstory. I'm here because 90% of the homes tested in the Turkey Hill area of Belchertown and beyond have come back positive for gross alpha. That's radioactive components. Radioactive particles in my drinking water is really scary. If there's interest from this group and time, I'd like to hear more about this, including whether it's important to do a second test for uranium, remediation best practices, financial support, etc.
Yes, I would definitely test for uranium and radon. I've actually one of the towns that we did some private well sampling under the Health Foundation contract. We did 40 samples in town. It wasn't actually even a high level area for radon, and they actually had a Board of Health regulation that tests the wells for gross alpha, but not for radon and uranium. And we found quite a lot of wells tested for high for radon that had passed the gross alpha. So it is worth doing the radon and the uranium test, because uranium is radon's cousin, if you will. So, but that definitely, if you have the gross alpha, then I would definitely look for the rest of the radiologicals if you have a drilled well. If you have a dug well, then it's not a problem because you're not in the radiological zone, if you will.
Okay, and then a takeoff to that, this question is for Andrea. Is there a plan to make relevant residents aware of this issue via the Board of Health, given that it's a public health issue?
So we did talk about this at the last Board of Health meeting in Belchertown, and we had Alan Weiss he is like a contractor, but has a lot of experience with water quality and like minerals and whatnot, and like geology, basically background. And you know, with private wells, it's the homeowner's responsibility, you know, for making sure that their water is clean. So as far as it being like a public health issue, this is something that's naturally found in the rocks. So it is something that we can, you know, that we don't have any funding for people to test the wells. Like this particular um, water testing that we're doing is for a well testing like program that we're doing, and it's temporary. So what I would recommend is, you know, I mean, I know a lot of people are talking to the neighbors, and people are getting their wells tested. We have not gotten any of the test results from anybody. So if more people are testing, that test stays between the lab and the homeowner. We are not made aware unless the homeowner or the lab makes us aware and somebody gives us a copy of the water quality test report. So a lot of times when people test their wells, we don't automatically get a copy because those results stay between the lab and the homeowner. So it's really up to the homeowner to ensure that the Board of Health gets a copy. And then that's when, if we see patterns, you know, like for example, arsenic is not, you don't want arsenic in your water, but there are arsenic veins that are found just naturally occurring. That doesn't mean it's a public health hazard. It just means that people need to be more aware of what is in their water. So typically people don't test for gross alpha, for example. It is a more expensive test. It's not part of the basic potability. And with private well regulations, it's only required to have that test for a brand new well that's being drilled. So, you know, prior to the Board of Health well regulations that just got passed in I want to say it was 2022, we made the requirement for new wells that are being drilled to test for the gross alpha. And so now that new wells in that area have gone in and been tested, and it's coming back, you know, positive for that in higher levels, that's the importance of having, you know, well regulations, so that, you know, people can test for these parameters that normally they might not test for them. So in a roundabout way, I hope I've answered the question. We can certainly provide educational information surrounding gross alpha, but as a homeowner to a private well, it would be the homeowner's responsibility to treat the well if it does have high levels of the gross alpha, and pay for those tests. It's usually like a home treatment, like I don't know if Jim, if you know more about the type of treatment that is involved in it. A new well is not required to be drilled, but there are treatment methods to put on your water system to get those levels to go down.
Yeah, it'd be dependent on which radiologicals they found. Like if it was a radon, it'd be a different kind of treatment than a uranium. The pathways too are different. Like a radon, the real threat is in showering, if you will. The level is 10,000 picocuries per liter, as in air it's 20. But at the same time you're showering, so it's a very high level, but you're aerosolizing it, you heating it up, and then you're breathing real deeply and right next to where it's coming out. So you can imagine that give you short, very high bursts of radon, which almost would be the same as being in your basement that has high radon levels in the air. Now uranium, that's a different kind of treatment because we're talking about ingestion being the problem. So really, you want to break it down to those two, if you will, the radon and the uranium, and see what kind of health issues you could have from there, and what kind of treatment is. Then, there's the different treatment options, if you will. I did want to mention too is we are spearheading in this legislation pending now in the state representatives and the state Senate on coming up with a standardized private well regulation for the state, much like Title V or the food code or the housing code, a minimum standard that every board of health would have. Because right now, there's each and every board of health has to make their own private well regulations. So you have 351 different ways of doing private wells, what to test for, how to drill them, everything. So we're looking to, if that legislation passes, they give Mass DEP the authority to write a minimum standard for local boards of health to enforce, much like any other local code. They could be more stringent, but not less stringent. It would set basically a level playing field for all of this. Because currently, the well drillers regulation of the state Mass DEP, they only require well logs and pump tests and stuff like that. There are no water quality requirements from the state, so it's all up to the local board of health from whether the well goes in or transfer a property, or even to say you lease out your property, you rent it to another homeowner. If the local board of health doesn't have a regulation requiring testing, there is no requirement for testing. So, so that's just another thing that hopefully while this is standardized, there'll be a basically one set of testing that local boards of health could be more stringent, but kind of standardize it from every jurisdiction, if you will. Hope I answered the question.
You did. I just want to summarize a couple of comments that people had referring to the gross alpha, and they both kind of said the same thing, that it's not something that people know about. It kind of is spreading by word of mouth, which is limited. And someone also said that a lot of people just don't know that they should do it. It's only because of the 2022 regulations that it's even coming to light, and that anyone with a home, this was what someone wrote, older than 2022 should be made aware that they should test for gross alpha. Just okay. We kind of started to get into the, like you said, Jim, that there would be different treatment for radon versus uranium, and someone asked if our water fails these tests, what are the fixes and what do they cost? And I think there's just too many answers, so I think I'm going to reroute that question and say, is there a resource? Does the Be Well Informed tool help people figure out what treatment units to use, and do they have a rough cost on there, just so people know what they're getting into?
Yeah, Be Well Informed will have the treatment units. Really doesn't go into the cost. I mean, a lot of the contaminants we can get away with a point of use filter, basically a extra spout coming out of your kitchen sink, and the filtration being underneath your kitchen cabinet. And you'll use that extra spout for all your drinking and eating, and then everything else, washing your dishes, be under the normal spout. And from there, like a reverse osmosis, you can pretty much get a lot of things out. It all really depends on what the contaminant is, though, and real generalization. And it's also, if you have multiple contaminants, what we call a treatment train, the things you want to take out first before you get to the other thing. Say you have high iron and PFAS. We want to get all the iron out before you put the PFAS through a carbon filter, because a carbon filter will just get filled with all the iron, and then you won't get any of the PFAS out. So it's not as simple as just saying, use this and be done with it. It all really depends on what you have for a contaminant.
Okay. I grouped a bunch of questions together that were all kind of similar, and I'm going to do this with the next question as well. One, where do you find, well, we'll do this one at a time. Where do you find the well driller, the well ID or the driller registration?
That would be on the State Well Drillers website and the Energy Environmental Affairs portal. And you would search. They have one they have one now. It's on GIS layer, so you can search by address, and it will basically pull up and say either they have the well log or not. From there, the local Board of Health might have it, but those are the only two places you would find it, unless you happen to know the original driller and they have really good records somehow. But those are really the only two places you could find it. And, you know, a lot of them, if you're from, you know, 80s back, you probably won't find it. I mean, I was at a well last week that was put in 2021 and they didn't have it in the state well drillers program. But I was also in a community that doesn't have Board of Health well regulations at all. So there was no one really making sure that the well log got to the state. So,
And those resources, someone asked if you could repeat those. Those resources are right in, well, the link that Jim mentioned is right in your materials tab. Someone also posted it earlier in the chat box, but this materials tab, anytime someone posts a helpful link in the chat, thank you for everyone who's doing that. I've been adding them to the materials tab. You might see them now. You might click on the materials tab. You might have to refresh that tab. It's the circly arrow thing. But again, you'll have this in the follow-up email, so you'll have all of these links, and they're pretty labeled pretty obviously here. The last one says well logs online. That is a link that Jim was just referring to. And a second question about the well logs. Someone asked, why do many well drilling logs lack the house numbers? I've noticed several on the same street, but the house numbers seem to be missing.
those are probably when they were building the neighborhood and they didn't have addresses yet. You know, they're probably lot and parcel numbers, a lot of them we see, which then get actual addresses, you know, when the houses are built. Usually the assessors can take those lot and parcel numbers and then match it up to an address. And I know the well drillers program had had some funding and some interns do a lot of that legwork for what they, you know, try to make their what they had at the state more accurate, if you will. But again, yeah, it's we see it all the time. Yeah, it's most like a lot and parcel number because, you know, when they put the well in, it wasn't a street. You know?
That makes sense. That seems frustrating also.
Oh yes.
When you're looking for an address. Next question, can a well go dry?
Yeah, all can, especially the dug and bored wells. Last summer we got, you know, quite a few calls about, you know, wells going dry, especially those dug wells. I did a well assessment and they had actually E. coli in the well, but you know, when we opened up the well, we actually found mice dead in the well causing E. coli, but you know, we could see that the well water level too was very, very low. So if you have a dug aboard well, you know, in a drought situation, definitely can go dry on you. A drilled well is less likely to. It's, you know, highly unlikely to, if you will. But you know, anything's possible depending on when it was drilled and, you know, like we said, how much water they got when they drilled that well. And again, those can be. I've seen homeowners. One house has a 100-foot well and the next door neighbor has a 400-foot well, and they both have about the same yield of water. So it's, you know, sometimes it's all about the luck when they're drilling down and, you know, which how much water they hit when in the rock formation.
That's all the questions that we had in the chat. I have now put a react button down at the bottom left-hand corner. You'll see a hand. Feel free to raise that hand if you would like to just unmute, or just write in the chat, you know, unmute me. I know that some questions are not easy to do the chat, to, you know, put into text. Oh, we have another one. I recently moved here from the coast where I had town water. And why do I need to know my driller's regs? Okay, I guess that's a one-part question. Why do I need to know my driller's regulations?
Driller's regs you wouldn't need to know, but if there's any local regulations on after the drilling, is done, if you will. I mean, if you bought a house and the well was drilled in the 70s, I mean, it's already in. It's not really much to do. But if there's some boards of health have, when you purchase a piece of property, has to have a water test before the transfer of property, like a Title V inspection. But other than that, no, you wouldn't need to know the well drills regs, other than what your well should look like under current standards, if you will, in the best.
She wrote regs, and I automatically went regulations. That's in my head. Registration. There we go. Why would anyone need to know their driller's registration number?
Registration number, you probably wouldn't need to know, but you want to get the well log. That's the big thing you want to know is you get your well log, regardless of how old your well is. If you can get your well log, which may or may not have that driller's registration number, but at least you're going to have all the other information of your well, how deep it is, where the water's coming from, what the pump test was, all that.
Yeah, and there's a couple of comments, just knowing your plot and lot number, or your map and lot number. It's called something different in every town. That's another way that you can search. Instead of searching by address, search by map or lot with the Board of Health. That's in the office. Yep. And someone said you need the registration number or the well ID to get the log. I don't know if that's probably the website.
No, on state website you should be able to search by address.
Okay. I think there's many ways to search, correct? So if you don't have anything else, whatever you do have, I believe there's different ways to search. Another question, do wells have to be tested to sell a home?
Totally up to the local Board of Health and or the mortgagee for the buyer, if you will. Sometimes the mortgage companies will do it, but it's all up to the local Board of Health what their regulations are. The model DP, Mass DP puts out a model regulation that they hope local boards are adopt, that local boards of health are under no requirements to adopt them, but they hope they do, and they're written like a local Board of Health regulation. Some have adopted that, and that would require transfer of property testing, and also if you're leasing the property, testing. But I don't believe Belchertown and Ware have that regulation. Am I correct, Andrea?
Belchertown does. That if you're transferring property, that the property owner is to have their private well tested and submit the results to the local Board of Health. Ware does not have private well regulations, so it's not a requirement, but like you said, depending upon the type of loan that you might be getting from the bank might require that private well to be tested.
And another couple of tips on how to find and use that website to find your well log is type in Belchertown for the city or the town, and then click search, and you can organize by street name, and you can just look through all of the listings for your street name. Lots of helpful people in here. Thank you. And I don't see any hands up. I have reached the end of the chat questions. Yep, so it looks like we have gotten through all the questions.
Excellent.
I want to remind you guys might have closing remarks, but I want to remind folks that we do have an evaluation. It's going to pop up as soon as you leave the session here. It'll also be in that follow-up email. We would really appreciate it if you could just take the 30 seconds or whatever, 45 seconds maybe, that it would take just to give us some of your feedback. Rate us, give us a comment. We use all those comments to try and make better sessions next time.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. And, yeah, well, if there are any questions, feel free to email us after you get the the information that we'll be sending out.